Hello, I'm Derek Barnes. I'm a working professional musician. I'm connected with theatre mainly and stage, and I work as a musical director and a conductor, arranger and a composer. And a lot of my work is to do with the education of young artists at a high level, university level, which I do in the UK. I've done some in the States, San Diego State University, and also in Scandinavia. I was professor of music theatre performance at Gothenburg University and head of vocal studies there, and worked with the international music theatre education in Finland. So I'm very much involved in working as a musician and giving some of that back to young artists, which I think is terribly important. Now, in my work as a musician, a lot of which is involved with vocal music, it was clear to me that there was something in the element of voice that was much more important than just entertainment. Before I went into music, I was going to go into sciences, so I was very much rooted in the idea of connecting science with my music. So some of the scientific research that I did comes back to me within the music.
Right, and Derek, you're very unusual in the way that you understand how the quality of voice affects the way a message is heard. So it also applies your thinking and way of working beyond performing arts.
Yes, indeed it does. Working with performing arts, one knows that that is all about communication, and you can differentiate sometimes between someone who can communicate and someone who can't. And it's very much to do with the intention of the communication. So intention is something that we all have as human beings, and is not just relegated to entertainment or music or performance. It's to do with communication, one human being with another, and certainly within therapy, or if you're a doctor, or if you're just a human being and communicating one to another. And the quality of your communication is very much connected with voice and how that is produced. I knew through my research that sound can produce certain physical changes within the body. It can change heart rate, it can change blood pressure, electrical conductivity of the skin, it can change mood by the different secretion of hormones within the endocrine system. So there is something that sound does that we respond to. So if that is the case, then we can see how that is, why that is, and can we use that to help other people in a healing situation and in the situation of communication.
So this can be learnt, these skills?
It can be learnt. One can be made aware. In fact, in my professional teaching work with theatre companies and vocalists that I train, I always make sure that we do a sound workshop in sound and consciousness before we embark on a study of formal training, so that the individuals are aware that they have a responsibility with their voice to their audience.
It's absolutely fascinating, Derek. Can you tell me then, if you use these ideas within the world of healing, in good therapy, people's sense of who they are, their sense of their identity changes?
Yes, I think it does. And the sequence really is that it's to do with the secret of breath. So breath is the carrier wave of the voice, and the voice is the carrier wave of the intention, and the intention comes from or is rooted in thought. So in a sense, in the end, we get the idea that the breath is also the carrier wave of the thought. And our intention and what we put into our voice will affect and alter the overtones within the voice. In other words, what I call colour. So the colour of the voice will affect how my intention gets towards you. I can change my colour, I can make it rather dark and unpleasant, or I can say, this is what I really want to communicate to you. So by altering the colour, one can put different ideas forward.
Fascinating, but we get into bad habits, do we not, in the way that we use our voices, particularly if our voices haven't been trained, if we've spent no time thinking about that.
I think that's the case. I remember from my studies that in ancient Greece, I believe that every young aristocratic son would have his phonos, would have his voice teacher, in a society that was very much rooted in debate and the use of voice. Of course, we're very much more to do with writing the stuff down and sending it by email than communicating with voice. So our communication skills have got somewhat dulled in that.
Yes, the whole is lost, is it not?
Yes, I would.
And how things link.
It's to do with the link. It's to do with the link.
Now, can you tell us perhaps a little bit about the shamanic tradition? Because this is coming very close to what I understand shamanism to be.
Yes, shamanism is a sort of a catch-all phrase, really to do with cultures where there is a central figure who is a healer or has certain skills. These are normally very natural skills. They're connected with nature. They're sometimes connected with herbs. They're connected with ritual. Ritual, we know, changes consciousness. So in maybe a primitive society where shamanism is quite prevalent, then the society would be influenced by what they could see or what they could feel and think it's slightly magical. And shamans will also, in certain cultures, use sound and change consciousness with the use of sound, either by voice, sometimes with instruments as well, drumming. So we know that drumming changes consciousness. We know that drumming goes on the adrenals and makes you slightly more aggressive, which is why drums are associated with war, for example. So there are certain things that will interact with the body and the brain and the endocrine system to change mood. Now, we know that sound is a physical thing. It's the movement of air particles, so that there has to be an evolved mechanism within the brain where those sounds and within the sounds, the overtones are, if you like, decoded and then used by the body and the brain for their own purposes. Change of consciousness, secretion of hormones, a natural healing function. So the shaman, in a magical sense, would look as though he's doing something quite extraordinary, when it's actually quite a natural process. And of course, we use sound to heal sports injuries. And although the overtones used for healing of sports injuries aren't as complex as the human voice, I think there's research to be done to take this further.
Can you illustrate how overtones work?
Yes, I can, and there's a piano here, so we can do it directly. If I play a single note, you can see it's a piano, so you know it's a piano, but you of course hear that it's a piano. Now, if that note was played by a violin or an oboe or a flute or indeed the human voice, then you'd still be able to detect that there was a different instrument, because there are elements within the sound that are built up vertical called overtones. Now, I can demonstrate how overtones begin to be generated by taking a single note, a single bass note. So there is the length of the string of the bass note, and I'm going to hold down silently a note above it. And that will take the dampers off the string, and that means that the string is free to vibrate as it wants. And I play the first note, and you should be able to hear the note above it, which I've not played. So the implication is, yes, we hear that note as like a fundamental note, but within that note is also that one. If I go a little bit further and I hold another note down, you can hear that's quite strong. The vibrations of the long string are setting off the vibrations of the open string. So we know that note is also involved with that note, it's contained within it. I can take this further, a little bit weaker. In fact, I could go up the piano with certain notes, and the overtones would continue. They continue to infinity. I can also demonstrate this with the voice, I hope. You can hear that's coming out of just the change of the embouchure, changing of the mouth cavity. We hear the fundamental note, but are able to manipulate the overtones over the top. If I produce a very pure sound, like a flute sound, or mathematical terms, a sine wave, you can hear that there's a manipulation of the sound, so that we can understand that our intention can go into the colour of the sound by altering the overtones, and that's how we really communicate.
It becomes very rich then, does it not? Fantastic.
You can change the richness from very dense to very pure, and that's really a simple explanation. Within the long string at the bottom, it's vibrating along its whole length. It's also vibrating along half of its length, and a third of its length, and a quarter of its length. And each of these subdivisions of the string is setting off the overtones. That's the fundamental string. That's half of it. That's a third of it. That's a quarter. That's a fifth. That's a sixth. And that's a seventh. And it will go on and on and on. So it's all contained within one sound. And that's how the overtones build up in richness.
So far you've spoken about how being at the receiving end of sound affects you, heals you, for good or worse. You know, it has an effect.
Yes.
You also run workshops, and is it not that you teach people to use their own voices differently in that? Indeed.
The workshops tend to start off with a little bit of theory, an explanation of overtones and how they work in a day-to-day sense, and also on a one-to-one situation where I will use sound myself into someone who's receiving it, so that they can feel for themselves. I'm very much of a mind that it has to be felt. I don't go the faith route, I go the demonstration route. You know, it has to be demonstrable. If it's demonstrable, it's real, and it is real. So that once people have understood that actually there's something in this, and I don't believe it, and what I like is a really good skeptic, because occasionally they've been completely changed in their outlook. Normally you can produce an effect with various sounds. The sounds that I use are taken from shamanic traditions. They might be North American Indian, they might be Aboriginal, they might be African, and I use it in a mix. The person receiving the sound then gives feedback, and there's no preconception of what happens. Once that's done as a demonstration, then we go further and we work in an improvisational sense with voice. If someone can see on the spot and hear on the spot what can be done, then that's the key. That's the key that turns the lock, that will unlock the riches of the possibilities of the voice. So we're looking to show that there is a possibility here, there's no mystery about it, and anyone can do it.
Derek, can you sum up what your ultimate ambition is?
It's to make people aware of the way that they communicate makes a difference to the person that is receiving the communication, so that within the voice there are colours that we can be aware of, that we can use to make our messages true. So that means if it's true for a shaman, for example, it can be true for any single one of us within our professional lives and within our personal lives, communicating one human being to another. We can release our personalities with our voice, and people can receive our personalities if we are true to the release and expression and intention that we are capable of doing.
Wonderful. Well, I hope to hear a whole lot more of you, Derek.
Thank you very much.